Cheers. Welcome to Hopefully Here. My name is Hope, and I am so stoked that you clicked on this video. Welcome to a lovely little discussion on the Women's Prize for Nonfiction 2025 Longlist. Everybody take a pause, grab your coffee, grab your hot drink, whatever it is that you prefer, and take a sip. Yum. Really hot. The Women's Prize for Nonfiction was announced today. The long list was announced today. And I decided I just wanted to see kind of what the books were about. I looked at the list really briefly, and my expectation going into this list was one, that I wasn't really going to know anything on the list. If I knew even one book, that would be considered a win. My nonfiction reading is not something I prioritize very often. Two, I expected it to be a very diverse list of authors and a pretty eclectic mix of subject matter that was being discussed. The Women's Prize, from what I know, particularly through fiction, has always been very good at having a wide array of selection, and I would anticipate that would be the same for their nonfiction. I expect that the topics that the books are covering are going to be pretty pertinent to today's environment, socially, economically, financially, politically, runs the whole gambit. And what else would I expect? I would just expect that the quality of writing would be pretty high tier. So those are my expectations going into it. Like I said, I looked at the list really briefly, but don't really remember what was on it. So we're going to go through it again, do a little bit of research into which books are on the list, what they're about, who the authors are. In terms of my reading, there's just no way I would commit to reading an entire long list of nonfiction. I don't think I would have a good time doing that. This year, right now anyways, that's just beyond my capacity. So something that I may attempt to do in the future one year, that would probably be pretty exciting. I'm not even sure that I would commit to the short list at this point. It'll really depend on where my reading is at when the short list is announced. And I don't know when that's going to be. I think May? I will try to put across the screen here when the shortlist announcement is, but I don't know when that is going to be at this point, nor do I know when the final winner is going to be announced. That's just what I have going on in my reading world right now. So shortlist, long list, definitely not. Shortlist, not likely. Winner, probable. I would probably read the winner of the nonfiction award. I did read Doppelganger last year. I'm pretty sure that's the one that won it last year by Naomi Klein, and it was a really good book. And this has nothing to do with what I would expect. I would expect all these books to be fantastic. It has everything to do with just what I would be capable of reading right now. And a long list of nonfiction, absolutely not. It's not on the tables. So we will go through this list, see what I find interesting. Books may get put on my TBR, maybe books that I want to reach for in the future. They just will not be books that I'm putting a time constraint on now to read before the dates come up. But let us look and see who is here. I'm pretty excited about it. First on the list, and this is listed alphabetically, so I will just go with that, is Autocracy Incorporated, The Dictators Who Want to Run the World by Anne Applebaum. So this is a book I've heard of. I imagine The Dictators Who Want to Run the World. It's a political novel. Let's read through. I'm not going to read the synopsis out loud. I know that's not pleasant for anybody. Give me a moment to read and let me see what I can finagle from it. Okay, that was a pretty intense little synopsis. And it's one of the taglines is just, the celebrated historian and journalist uncovers the networks trying to destroy the democratic world. And it seems like they look at corporations and propaganda and military and police. It seems to be a whole group of people that she's maybe looking at and dissecting and trying to figure out why the state of the world is the way it is right now. Honestly, this is a book that I think I would find really interesting. I don't like discussing politics because it's a disaster, but it is what I studied in university. I do still find it really, and not entertaining, I do still find it very interesting. So it is definitely a book that I think I would like to read at some point. Maybe it'll win, and then I will read it for sure. We then have Embers of the Hands, Hidden Histories of the Viking Age by Eleanor Baraclow. And this is, I would imagine, a history of the Vikings. So it is. It's about kind of the history of Vikings, but it says it covers here Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Iceland, Greenland, part of the British Isles, continental Europe, and Russia, which I find interesting because when you think Vikings, you definitely think, for me anyways, more of the kind of Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. So I think that could be really interesting. I find books like that, like they're very niche almost in a way. You really have to be interested in that to want to read the book. It's not one that would necessarily invite a new audience. So I think the fact that these books are getting put on a prize probably opens their audience up pretty highly or pretty widely. And that would be really exciting for the authors and really great for readers because you're potentially reading subjects that you just naturally would never be inclined to pick up. And this is one of those ones where I wouldn't naturally be inclined to read a book about Viking history. It's just not a history that interests me, nor do I know anything about. I know literally nothing about it, but it's really cool that it's on the list because, like I said, it just opens up the minds to a lot of readers, I would imagine. I picked up my coffee and then took no coffee. Okay, much better. Today's just regular decaf coffee, by the way, nothing special. The Eagle and the Heart, The Tragedy of Richard II and Henry IV by Helen Castor. I feel like an English history novel is pretty standard. It's just one of those time periods that gets written about a lot, and to have something like that on this list is not surprising. I hope that maybe the author does something unique and different and looks into a different time period that warrants it being on a list like this. So let's see. Richard II and Henry IV are two cousins whose rivalry brought their nation to the brink of disintegration and back again. It is a story about power, masculinity in crisis, and the nation brought to a brink of catastrophe. So definitely just seems like a bit of a historical book. Again, in terms of the writing style, my hope for all of these is that they're not super academic, that they have some narrative in them that makes them enjoyable to read. I think for me, reading a more academically lined nonfiction can be really challenging unless it's for a particular reason. Obviously, when I was studying at university, reading academic nonfiction was what was expected of me. And so when I'm reading for pleasure, I kind of hope that books are a little bit more fluid in their reading and not so much intense information dumping. And that's sometimes what happens, I find, with these historical novels that follow particular people or particular time periods. That can get very detail heavy and you lose kind of the thread or the enjoyment of the story. So this is one I would want to hear about before I picked up. But again, not one that I would run to immediately, but not something that I would say I'll never read either. A Thousand Threads by Nena Cherry. That's such a great cover. Oh, it's a memoir. Okay, I was hoping we would see some memoirs. Memoirs are obviously some of the easiest nonfiction to read, I find personally. Just because it's really more about storytelling than it is about learning information or trying to get across information in an argument, typically. And so that's really exciting. So Cherry, I haven't heard of this. I haven't heard of this woman before. A young woman made her debut, gold bra, gold bomber jacket, and proudly, gloriously 7 months pregnant. This was no ordinary artist. Okay, I have never, musician, songwriter, collaborator, activist, mother, daughter, lover, friend, icon. This is her story. That's really cool. I've never heard of this person before. Have you heard, am I just living under a rock? Have you guys heard of this person? Very neat. I'm really glad to see a memoir as it made it to the list. The Story of a Heart by Rachel Clark. The first of our organs to form, the last to die. The heart is both a simple pump and the symbol of all that makes us human, as long as it continues to beat, we hope. It is one of those terrible things. So it's a story, it seems like a girl gets into a car accident and they decide she'll be a donor for organs, and somebody else, a 9-year-old boy, gets this heart transplant. And it's one of those terrible things. I can't even imagine what it would be like to know that you are getting a heart to save your kid, but that means somebody else's kid has, like, it seems like that would be a pretty intense book, but one that, the unforgettable story of how one family's grief transformed into a life-saving gift. I think that could be a really interesting book, and one that I might put on my TBR just to have on my TBR for sure. Raising Hare by Chloe Dalton, and Hare is spelled H-A-R-E. There's a little bunny. All right, what do you say? What is Raising Hare? This book sounds like it's a relationship between a woman and a rabbit. It sounds like it happened through lockdown, and I'm not really sure how it came to be or what happened of it, but it's about the extraordinary relationship between a human and an animal, rekindling our sense of awe towards nature and wildlife. I think this is a book that if it won, potentially was shortlisted, I would look further into, but I don't know that it's one that I would go to immediately. It seems like it's one of those stories. Sometimes you get those stories where this is all speculation. Like, I'm just gonna put this out there. I've never heard of this book before. I've never picked them up. But sometimes you get books that are really important stories to the people it happened to and the surrounding family, surrounding members, but they don't have the biggest impact when it goes out further. And this reminds me of kind of one of those stories where with self-reflection and stuff, it's really great for your immediate and secondary circle. But the further out it goes, the larger the ripple goes, the less impact it has as a story. And I'd be curious to see what the reviews are in this one. Doesn't mean it won't be spectacular. That's just, that type of story is what it reminds me of. And so it has me kind of keeping it at arm's length a little bit. Ootlin by Jenny Fagan. We have another memoir. Again, always excited to see memoirs on the list. Oh, okay, so this is about going through the UK childcare system and what that is like. I've read a few stories that have this type of thread about being somebody who either grew up in foster care, was put into foster care, and you're in and out, or am I going to be adopted, am I not? And as someone who has worked in the child protection field before, it's heartbreaking. It's a devastating thing to have to witness. And reading about it, like, I've seen it firsthand, so I appreciate books about it because I know the depth of the trauma that can come along with that, but it's still a topic that you really have to be, for me anyways, in the right mood to read. And I think it being written as a memoir just adds that further layer of impact. So it's not one that I would shy away from necessarily, but it is one that I would have to make sure I'm in the right space in order to enjoy. But I think if anybody who goes through an experience being in childcare and child protection services and writes a memoir about it, man, oh man, like the strength you have to be able to tell that story. Why Fish Don't Exist, a story of loss, love, and the hidden order of life by Lulu Miller. Again, oh, another great cover. There are some banging covers on this list. I love that one. If fish don't exist, what else do we have wrong? What? All right, let me see what's going on here. Okay, the synopsis doesn't really give much away. I'm going to read just one of the little paragraphs. This is a story unlike any other you've read before. It's about a very tall man with a walrus mustache, the injustices and unexpected deliverances of the universe, love that strikes like lightning, and about why fish don't exist after all. So I'm not really sure. It seems like this person is researching somebody else who did a lot of study and was a fish specialist. Yeah, the synopsis isn't giving too much away. So if you like nonfiction, if you like fish, this one might be for you. Next, we have Agent Zoe, the untold story of fearless World War II resistant fighter Elzbieta Zawaka by Claire Mully. It is one thing you don't hear very often about women who were frontline active participants in the war, and I don't know that this is what that's going to be, but there was one I read last year about, what was that book called? About a female, and she was an assassin, and I had never heard her story before, and I found it really fascinating. She's the only female member of the Polish elite special forces. She became the only woman to parachute from Britain to Nazi German occupied Poland. Whoa. Wow. That's cool. That's a story I would read just because I think her story deserves to be told and live on. And if it's one that's kind of been forgotten, then that's one that I would put my time into, trying to keep that story going. Wild Thing, A Life of Paul Bunyan by Sue Perdot. And I think it's very possible I pronounced the Paul last name wrong. Very, very possible. Everybody, if you're yelling at me right now because this is some famous artist or something that I should absolutely know how to pronounce his name, yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, he is an artist known for his post-impressionist paintings. Okay, I apologize. It's not a name that I recognize visually, although potentially it's a name that if I was to hear it, I would know who it is. Sue Perdot, who wrote the book, is a award-winning biographer. So she is looking into the life of this man who I guess was a stockbroker and an artist. So there we go. Again, one of those books that seems pretty niche. So being put on this awards list probably really broadened the audience for them. What the Wild Sea Can Be, the Future of the World's Ocean. Okay, another fish. Not necessarily fish, but water one. So that is the cover on that. Again, really pretty. I like that cover a lot. I know oceans are one of those things that are super important to the way the world functions. And it's one of those things that a lot of people are trying to figure out how to protect, because if something goes wrong with the ocean, something goes wrong with the world, more so than it already is. And I think that seems to be what this book is about. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where I would be curious to know kind of where the line between narrative and academic information dump kind of happens and how that works out. Because I think this is one that could get very sciencey and heavy in reading, but if it's done properly, then maybe they'd be able to kind of strike a really great balance between just enjoyment of reading and learning while you read. Peep Show, The Murders at 10 Rillington Place by Kate Summerscale. Ooh, this seems to be kind of a true crime thing. So in 1953, police discovered the bodies of 3 young women, but it turns out earlier on, they had discovered bodies there before, and the person who committed those murders had been hanged. So did they get the wrong man? Interesting. All right, so the true crime fans, you got yourselves a book on this list. That's really cool. Sister-in-Law, Fighting for Justice in a System Designed by Men by Harriet Wistridge. So this seems like something, just based on that title, it seems like something that I would very much expect to be on the women's list, particularly just at the state of where we are right now. So that's not surprising. Looking at law and legislation and policy and how the systems are skewed towards men, and that is another one of those books where what the balance between information dumping and enjoy and like just reading a narrative story comes in. Probably one that's pretty important to read, or just good to have a little bit more knowledge around. It's definitely one that I would look into reading in the future. Not one that I think I could read right now, but one that in the future is definitely something that I could enjoy. Two Left, Tracker by Alexis Wright. Oh, it's one of these books. I find these covers to be fascinating when the first part of the book is right on the cover. I think that's so cool. A larger-than-life champion of Aboriginal self-determination. Oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, and it's an Australian Aboriginal self-determination. This is obviously a pretty important topic. I think one that is growing in many countries, self-determination of Indigenous populations. And I am currently reading actually a book called Two-Spirit Journey for Canada Reads. And these stories, again, heartbreaking, but so important. And I would expect the same to be heartbreaking but important book would be probably what is happening with this one too. Final book, Private Revolutions, Coming of Age in New China by Yuan Yang. Man, these covers, I like that cover too. Great covers. Is this another memoir? Yuan Yang is the first Chinese-born British MP. There we go. Tells the stories of 4 Chinese women striving for a better future in an unequal society. So basically exactly what it says on the cover, that's what the story is about. and from a country that just, I don't know enough about their political system intelligently. Obviously, you know a little bit about the political system, but I don't know enough intelligently. So it would always be interesting to see kind of what women have to go through in different countries that parallel and diverge from what women have to go through in the country that you grew up in. I find that really fascinating. Hi, I'm editing. I forgot a book. By the Fire We Carry by Rebecca Nagel is another book, and it is about the search for sovereignty and justice on native land in America. It seems like it focuses more on Oklahoma. Definitely a story I would be more than interested in looking into. Probably will put it on the TBR and see how the year plays out. But again, just another really important look at what colonization and murder and trying to wipe out a population has done and shaped a people that still are trying to survive to this day. Definitely a book that sounds very intriguing. It's quite the list. It's definitely, like I said, it's at ClickTick. It's got a ton of diversity in the authorship. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And there are 16 books on this list. If anybody is out there undertaking reading the full long list, good for you, props to you. Please let me know down below. I would be very curious to see how some of these play out, because some of them sound incredibly fascinating. And I will definitely be looking to at least add a few to the TBR to read over the next year or so, not necessarily, like I said, in time for the announcements of winners and shortlists, but I will definitely be paying attention to who shortlists and who wins, because there seem to be some really incredible topics on here. I don't know why I just showed you my phone. I think I still had the list up. There seem to be some really important topics on here, and when you can read that information and get it from somebody who is a knowledgeable source, it's only beneficial to you and your brain when it comes to just knowing what's going on in the world. But there you go. That is the Women's Prize nonfiction long list for 2025. I can't believe the Women's Prize is up and going for 2025. I absolutely love it, and I'm looking forward to following this one along, and obviously the fiction as well. For now though, I got a coffee. I am reading Booktuber's Best still, and I'm gonna get to that, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.